um, yeah, so I was really proud to see that and to hear that. So, um, cool. It's now three after, so we'll go ahead and get started. Um, as many of you recall or know, my name is Andre Koen, and I am the program director for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Um, and Allie is has that same position in Florida. Allie, do you want to introduce yourself and say a couple of things about you?
Yes, good morning. It's great to be on with you and to join Andre in this effort, and great to see the comments from Diva that this is very helpful and that it's a part of remaining connected during this break. I have the opportunity of working with the Florida campus and helping to lead the enterprise vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just glad to be on. So I'll be in the chat and be silenced, but Andre knows normally I will interject somewhere. But good to see everybody, and thanks for making time to join us.
All right. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So when we think about this idea of inclusive leaders, we're kind of going to do a deeper dive. And I wanted to go through the PDF, do things. What we used to do is changing and has changed, right? And and I mentioned earlier in a session that the 2030 bold vision is today. I find it absolutely amazing that our leadership started us on this journey for 2030, which actually mentally prepared us for today, right? So all the things that kind of come up in the bold forward strategies, many of those things have had to be implemented because of the conditions that we're currently in, uh, almost 10 years early, right? And so when we talk about inclusive leadership, it really is a set of tools that prepares us for a future that is uncertain, right? A future we know nothing about. And I find those tools necessary because so this is and I typically would share this kind of stuff in the sessions, but so I was a middle school and high school teacher, and I remember when I first started teaching, I had a list of rules on the wall, and don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, that for my middle schoolers. And my middle schoolers spent more time trying to find workarounds of my rules as opposed to actually living to the letter of the law in my classroom or the intention of the things that we put in place in my classroom. And so what I had to come to realize was that I could not prepare them for every aspect of their lives, or for every contingency. I couldn't have a rule for every contingency, although I think we often do, right? I don't know if you've seen some of those forms, right? Anyway, but I couldn't have a contingency for everything that would happen in my classroom. Just like, my parents could not have prepared me for, um, they couldn't teach me about proper sexting, having relationships on the text, right? They could not have prepared me for those things. Because the technology didn't exist, right? And so there are situations in my classroom that could happen that I could not necessarily be prepared for. And so my parents did kind of demonstrated for me the kinds of principles that I ended up putting into my classroom. And so we moved from a ruled centered classroom to a principled centered classroom, right? And so when it came to consequences, both positive and negative, those things were given back to my students, because I wanted to prepare a living um, of because I could your situation. And so when we think about these inclusive leaders, what we're actually talking about are principles that we can apply to be an effective leader in any given situation, right? In any given situation. And I won't say that uh, one size fits all for inclusive leaders, but I will say that these sizes fit most. Right? So these sizes fit most. So let's move on to inclusive leadership. So you have this handout, so I don't want to belabor the point too much. Um, uh, Attention to these 5 traits, right? So there's the inclusive mind. That's the desire to be, or the acumen that one wants to acquire. Inclusive mindset. There needs to be a sense of cultural competence and agility. We need to have greater adaptability. We have to be aware of our own bias, with the caveat that we're seeking a little bit of the session today. And then 5, creating belonging. And so we recognize in the classroom setting, we would go ahead and these this exercise that's here with this with those primary shapes, and we would construct a diagram using shapes. Again, when we think about inclusive leaders, we're thinking about diversity in a particular kind of way, that it is our commonalities and our differences. So if somebody could type that into the chat room, our commonalities and our differences. If you can type it in the chat room, that would be great. That it is our commonalities and our differences. So in the chat, if someone, let's just go through this exercise really quickly, right? So how are these shapes similar? So if you can type in the chat, how are these shapes similar? They are closed. They're gray in color. They're two-dimensional. I didn't think about that. They are two-dimensional. They're used for similar purposes, all right? Similar sizes, all right? So now let's think about how these shapes are different. And that should be pretty obvious, right? Yeah, they are all different shapes, right? So some are pointy, some are round, all right? The various numbers of points and probably sides, right? Yeah. So when we think about diversity being our commonalities and our differences, why do you think that's an important distinction about how we, how we talk about diversity inclusion? Why is that important to recognize the commonalities and differences? If you can type that in the chat room, that would be great. And if you're on the phone, go ahead and unmute yourself and to that question. So why is it important to recognize our commonalities and differences? It helps us create equity. We learn from each other's experiences. Everyone learns to interact differently. We see each individual's and their needs are met. We can act better as a team, new perspective, open eyes. We can leverage each other's strengths. Commonalities bring us together, and differences bring diverse perspectives, right? So a theme that I'm hearing and that I'm seeing in the chat room is that we really see these as valuable, both commonalities and differences. And what I would like to also suggest that it's okay to recognize difference. It's okay to see and acknowledge difference, but it's actually what value. The real question is, what value do you attach to the differences that you think you see, right? And so when we run into problems, oftentimes we've placed a value or are not sure of the value that we've placed in the difference that we see. And so how do we recognize and honor those things? And so thank you so much for great comments in the chat room. We'll have an opportunity to open up the lines in just a second. So I want to move on to this inclusive mindset. And so an inclusive mindset is a mindset that is geared towards collaborative thinking and managing ideas, people, and relationships. It's about being open to ideas, knowledge, perspectives, and approaches and styles, and listening to different voices from everyone, regardless of their gender, race, or job roles. And so one way for us to think about this inclusive mindset is that we have to engage our head, our heart, and our hand, right? And so we have to, inclusive leaders have to, sense of humility, know every head and recognize means that I can learn something from someone else, and so constantly in this process of learning, they also have some emotional intelligence, right? And so they're able to kind of read only people but situations to try to figure out what's the best way to move things or to help groups, and then lastly, they actually implement based on the things that they've learned about through using data, learned through inquiry, things that they've learned in terms of how to move people. Let me have an inclusive mindset. So who has an inclusive mindset would address this problem very differently than someone who doesn't, right? In a democratic process, you can unmute yourself for this part if you so desire, but I want to ask you, what is the significance of 51% democratic process? So you can answer that in the chat room, you can unmute yourself, but what is the significance of 51% in a democratic process? What's the significance of 51%? It's the majority. It's the majority of one group, okay? Hey, Meredith, good to see you. What's the challenge with 51% in a democratic process? Doesn't consider the makeup of the group. Yes, Denise hit it right on the head, right? And she let the cat out of the bag. So we'll just jump right to that. Brittany says that one person can make a difference, and absolutely, one person can make a difference. But Denise hit it on the head. That 51% means that you have won, right? So whatever the ballot means that you have won. However, 49 is still getting no. If we have won, but that 49% can really brag. How do I get to be this 51%, right? And so what the inclusive leader says, all right, look, we're at this little drag. Let's alleviate that drag. How do we alleviate that drag? And so we do that with our head. We do that with our hand. And so these inclusive leaders, this inclusive mindset, even though we're doing things well, do we down and they say, do people that we need? How are folks feel this process? Not just want to augment it, but we want to be effective, right? And so if I can get, 51% is, but if I can tap into that 49% and bring them with me, I'll be much more effective, right? I'll be much more effective. This inclusive really has us tease that out. So here are some aspects of inclusive behaviors and behaviors of leaders, right? So inclusive leaders share decision-making power with their team. Ultimately, they make the decision, but they work through that process, right? An example, furlough process, he kept us talking. He the final decision. We understood the process by making that decision. We understood our roles in that decision. So it was easier to get 49% more into that decision making because we understood it, right? So they encourage informed risk, failures. They inspire and influence great work, more flexibility, their creativity. They use multiple forms of feedback, advocates for the development through special and private. They get to know this as a credit. They give courage them hire and achieve unbiased merit-based promotion. Right, so these are the kinds of things. And I don't know if you recognize any of those 11 things, but they're a lot like, right, the direction as an organization. Yeah. Exclusive holds all decision-making power, avoids risk-taking, tells them to work on, tells when to work with people, feedback, pays no attention to their people as an employee. They learn about people. They approach as opportunities to learn and grow, and they always maximize people. So the whole picture. And so when we look at this, what do you see in that particular picture? And I'm going to go to the chat room and answer just for a second. Yeah. That is, how do you think risk aversion and informed risk fit into inclusive, exclusive behavior? It's a fact. Oh, if we go back to even thinking about the head, the heart, and the when we think, I can be averse to change or to taking risks. But if I have knowledge, if I've thought about enough that I process, understand what boundaries are, my emotional part, I can now override to make those decisions actually happen. And about this inclusive behavior or exclusive behavior, it really is about how how we think that we should, how do we engage in a process, right? In HR, as an example, there are tons of places where I can to take a risk or do some. So I have that knowledge. There are also places where that risk can't be taken, right? And so in a medical procedure, we, that's probably not the best place to do those things. I'm thinking, I up explaining the can somebody else help with Lisa's question? Because I want to do it. I want to do. How would you? How do you think that risk aversion and informed risk fit with inclusive and exclusive behavior? What are your? And you can unmute yourself because that's a really good question. Wow. So Aaron just shared, I think that risk aversion can sometimes be used as a scapegoat for not being inclusive. Online, and what do you mean by that? Aaron, can you say more about that? Because that was a really interesting point. And everyone has been unmuted, by just so you know. Okay. So Aaron is saying is saying you're risk averse can be an for not taking full responsibility for being inclusive, right? Diva just shared. I would guess it would tend to be a micromanage. Part of the shared acknowledging an idea, but not acting on it because it's too risky. Says risk aversion may mean you will not tolerate a leader. Employees should not make any mistakes. Informed risk means that you are helping the team understand the risks, and some risk may be tolerated as a consequence of growth. And those were the things I was trying to say, but I couldn't get them together. You guys are brilliant. You are so brilliant. Risk averse leader is afraid of what they don't know, so they will have trouble accepting differences. And here's something else that I think is also all of humanity to be able to risk of to just right. You see as learning opportunities and not problems, with the recognition that there are some risks are that we have to use wisdom, right? So I'm not giving my wants to drive my risk because there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, right? And so so yeah, no, you guys did a wonderful job answering that. So so much for uh, that. Um, so so here's a situation. Um, Let me know if this sounds familiar, right? A female employee who was well trained in team management skills in a fast moving environment was hired in a patient care team as a manager. For 2 years, she received positive feedback her team. They liked her leadership style of providing clear direction, efficient, solving, quick, holding people accountable for their actions. And they believed her style helped create dynamic relationships. She gets a promotion to a new department. Her new supervisor, a male leader, thought differently of her skills. The supervisor is used to a leadership style that carried out fixed official duties under a hierarchy authority, relied on rules for management and decision making, the product adaptation. The supervisor believed it was good for a female leader to be, but it did not power. The supervisor through 5 or 6 with back before and moving things fast to fit him. Style of leadership without going through a hierarchy of authority was not the right way to get things done. He preferred the working style of leading by the book, courage, and flexibility. Being wedded to leadership ideal led to his dismissive behavior, making the manager's work appreciated. Since the manager didn't feel a sense of belonging and connection with her supervisor, she quit. First of all, is this is this something that could happen either in our organization? Have you seen this happen? Um, yes. So someone's yes. This can't be that uncommon. Okay. So we know that the truth is always in the middle, right? So two sides, people worry, but so the what uh, what might you give to supervisory decisions or their acumen, their preferences for things? Or encouragement would you give the supervisor chat room? Bias or super boss this employee. Okay, so one person had said, "Let's have an exit interview with the person that quit, so we can learn from them." All right, that there may be room for recognition, a place for both styles of leadership, and they can be balanced with one another. He needs to foster an environment that creates a sense of belonging. Reflect on more on the inclusiveness of others of other work styles. Okay. Be open to embracing different leadership styles. Okay. he was able to recruit this great talent in the first place. So that's a positive. So at least he could see that. Okay. So be true to your own style, but tailor it to individuals you are working with. Right. Walk with the supervisor to seek to understand where the supervisor is coming from and what may be driving his behavior. So I will say that I wonder if the way the content is given to us is the difference, would say, than with the employee that quit, right? So what advice or what encouragement would you give the who just quit? So or how would those be different? And then what you would say to this employee, like if she quit, you would what would be your recommendations or encouragement? I guess you have to think about where your line in the sand is. We all have our limits to our flexibility. I certainly believe that you hear that. Denise, what else? So this is an interesting concept because I do hear this a lot that we all have a line in the sand. S what else can what else can that line turn into? So we have any further environment a little bit further, just different thing. What could that into? So Aaron also said that she would say lots of that flexibility is to remain true to yourself and the perfect fit for the perfect. Uh, yeah, so the line could turn right. It could turn. Walls do two, and they at the same time. So the line in the sand, you need to be really clear about what that is for yourself. Is it a goal, or is it you know it's the thing that will break the camel's back? Speak. The employee needs to try to have an open, honest conversation with the supervisor to start to understand what each of them needs, right? So they both have different, they both have needs, so they can reach a balance, right? And so when we think about this inclusive mindset, not just that it is about the heart. It is really okay. So if the supervisor was following the rules to the right to do so. However, given the nature of the with and under that supervisor, there's wisdom that is used to work with people, right? That you can be effective. Uh, some of that process stuff around in order to be effective in achieving your goal. So it depends on how we want to balance stuff, right? I said, right, and at a bumper sticker. My next, Aaron, right, and your abilities. So let because we have tons of things to cover, and we will not be able to give them justice given the short amount of time that we. So, uh, so with kind of spirit in mind, let me minimize this just a little bit. Um, a little bit about piece. So, do you thought you were leading in a cohesive team. However, Marcia, a new member, brings her perspective and unique approaches to the team that adds complexity to the team. On a challenge the way things have historically been done, which makes some members quite uncomfortable. Times at team meetings, she spoke her mind, but some saw that as old ways of doing things. Her thoughts and ideas were innovative, outside the box, which upset some individuals. Plus, her strong accent made it difficult for some to understand her. Some felt uncomfortable with her weird ideas and communication style. Many of the um, many of the team thought it was good to hear fresh perspectives, new ideas, and differently. So, Marcia, is this the is the, so first of all, what kind of culture do you think Marcia is walking into? When we talk about cultural competence, and what kind of culture is she walking into? A homo, okay, a homogeneous culture. Joining a diverse culture, someone who accepted others, okay, and somewhere uncomfortable. All right. So when we talk a little bit of cultural competence and agility, we've kind of gone over the glossy part of culture, right? It is recognizing that that people have behaviors, social context, and drill down just a little bit further and talk about these kind of four aspects, uh, particular organizational culture. So groups and heterogeneous groups all the same. And heterogeneous groups are those groups that have a mix, lots of mixture. We'll use those because we can apply them to different culture. There's one way of doing things, and how we all do that. And then intercultural is that there are a number of different ways that we look at how we do things. There's proactive, which means that we operate from our core outward to the universe. And then there's reactive, the universe to what. And then there is divesting people, or taking their resources from them, or their skills, their gifts, their talents from them. Investing, where we're pouring into people, where we're giving them resources and of our talents. And so these are some things to think about culture. So when we can have homogeneity in terms of all sorts of categories, at uh, we can look at racial categories. We can look at learning style categories, right? So here's something that we oftentimes don't talk about in terms of diversity. It's like introverts. And if we look stage, recognize oh, I don't want to call my, right, so I take um, are oftentimes seen as leaders in organizations, in organizational cultures, are these people typically introverts? Could somebody type their answer in the chat room? So what is your answer? Are those folks typically seen or extroverts who are so-called? Yeah. Typically, leadership, it doesn't have to be true that extroverts are the leaders, but all too often, we act created a culture that cultures that or the who has uh, how what are the things that we value in our culture. And so I think it's really important to be mindful because that's where we get the culture, not only the cultural competence, cultural agility, move in between spaces based on our goals, cultures that support, and not just do because that's how it's right. And so so typically those leaders have been seen as extroverts, but that's not necessarily an effective leadership style or strategy for all situations. So I do want to just kind of focus a little bit on. We'll skip that. I want to speed pass through some stuff. You have this as a handout, so you can get into that. So greater adaptability. So we're currently in a situation, and so I'll read the definition. We're trying to adjust our environment, right? And so greater adaptability to agile cognitive mechanisms that enable then the same issue, and we must remain emotionally flexible and be ready a new paradigm of thinking under a different situations in order to succeed in every changing environment. That was in a lot basically say that we as leaders we have to recognize that we always have choice, and so it is the job for the answer to a problem and help people adapt to it by engaging the head, the heart, and so adaptive leader recognize that constantly change, have to constantly, and going back to Aaron, we get it right on my bumper sticker. We get it right. Yeah. We be right or we get it right. Thank you. So yeah, this idea being of greater adaptability is crucial because the context is always changing. There's equilibrium that we have to deal with. The change that we have to deal with. And so how do we deal with change, right? And so this is a question that we typically pose in the classroom setting. Of your team members feel unreasonably pressured to meet the rising cultural competence expectations, being made to take diversity online modules, the sexual harassment training, and the discussion on LGBTI issues seem to be too much, can't handle. And all this talk of diversity, they feel left out. They have become, top it all off, all without any increase, even recognition. And these are perceptions that employees have. So, how would you think about how do you think about this? So, what's going on with the individual statements, and how do you help them as a leader? So how do you help this person as a leader? How do we face change? I mean, is it legitimate that people would say that, oh, yeah, they could be scared, and so they need to be reassured. All right, scared of what? Oh, messing up, scared of messing up, saying the wrong thing, right? From acting, right? Is it possible to our earlier conversation being uh, avoidant of could that fear of being embarrassed be of as to why someone would be risk avoidant, right? So we're going to embarrass someone. So I got to think about that. That's important. It help the team see that is moving too fast. Speak openly in team meetings to increase the comfortability and facilitating micro learnings and discussion. Yeah. Um, Sometimes, if you're presented with your own, you can set a mirror, counter people who don't quite get it. I'll ask them a similar. I'll present their situation and change some things about it, and then ask them about that, and then go, "Well, no, would be that would be horrible." And so here's one way to think about some of your behaviors, right? So help them. Um, yeah. So how do we help them address spies? See to it that we eliminate some of those blind spots, and most happens through relationships, education, and then building. So head hand, so using that information. I'm going to have people tell their stories, and then we're going to act out some policies, some activities, the things that we. So there's that. We have just a couple. I want you to feel free to go through the rest of greater adaptability, and you should do here to unconscious bias. We've already talked about unconscious bias a great deal. There's units on learning for unconscious. Know that there's the right fit bias and the double standard bias, which actually is a form of identity bias. We talked a little bit about when we were together. I'll leave you with the idea of creating a sense of belonging. At the workplace is an individual's psychological need to feel valued, recognized, and supported, and included. It brings meaning, satisfaction, fulfillment to people's work. And so when we creating a sense of comes important time thinking about allophilia or positive for one another. This is a truly leadership to creating to being an inclusive leader, right? And so when we think about inclusive leaders, these are the 5 things that we should do. We we should keep our word. So as a leader, it's important to do what you say and say what you'll do, right? Because people often to what you're saying. If I what to so acting with principles, right? So those rich ties values or organizational values are extremely important when we don't know what to do. So we act on in receiving. So if you're going to be a leader that creates an inclusive environment, you have to be able enough to receive feedback. Beware of affinity bias and unconscious bias. And I would even add implicit bias, which is that bias that's in our organization. But be aware of those. Aware of affinity bias or have a desire to look parent and process decision as much as you can tell people, right? Given your role, given your responsibility, but give people opportunities to make decisions for themselves. Well, I don't think my would like this assignment. Let's give it or ask them what's in their bandwidth, skills, or their competence to making decisions for people. And then 5, honest about performance and development focus, right? So sometimes we pass people along because it's easier. Not we. I have seen people have been passed along because it's easier to pass someone actually deal with a challenge to grow them, to help them learn, right? So it's easier to pass them along. Create these inclusive. We have to be honest their performance and to develop, because it's all about this transparency and safety. This is the thing that encourages people to want to give their best. And so when we think about these aspects of inclusive leaders, we know that we could spend hours talking about these 5 inclusive leadership traits. But I want to thank you so much for joining us for this hour of power, if you will, around these traits. And feel free to contact me if there are aspects of the session that you want to do in your own teams, that you need some or you want some more clarity, wrestle with these ideas. I'm open to doing that. Please look for more sessions on my learning. We'll actually do each of these traits individually. Again, I want to say thank you so much for doing see, there's so many levels that we can do this, and again, we're very appreciative of you. In our
Just that it was a great session. I enjoyed from everybody, and don't take my quietness as that I wasn't engaged. I just didn't want to interrupt the flow there. But I would also encourage, one of the ways that you is by sharing thoughts. So I thought the content in the chat was very good. So thanks.
Yeah. And I want to thank all of you, particularly of assuring in whatever role that you have that the needs of the patients are coming first. My name is Andre Koen. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, or observations, to get a hold of us. And I look forward to seeing you become. And we're Ali. Thanks, everyone. We will see you later.